happy to have you on our episode today.
Thank you, Pauline. I'm very happy to be here.
So we know in our fast-paced world, we constantly walk fast, speak fast. Everything that we do, we're very impatient. So how is it that our conversations become so quick that we just want to reply as quickly as possible to whoever is saying without truly understanding or comprehending what the other person is saying in conversations?
There are a few things that we are talking about here. First, I think you have rightfully pointed out that people are always in a rush. They are always in a hurry to reply. In that, it kind of in a way very much reacting to the situations that's around them. So I think it's important for us to understand the motivation and the reason behind that behavior, that thinking. As we know, the world has changed quite a bit, especially in the last couple of years. The COVID working model has changed. The business landscape has changed. The way consumer think has changed. So people are still grappling with some of these changes and still responding and adapting. So there is a certain level of anxiety that most of us are encountering right now. As a result, when you don't have clarity of information and when you are in a way working in an ambiguous environment, the stress level will people will tend to be more tense up in a lot of situations, and therefore especially in communication. So Pauline, I think you pointed out a very interesting phenomenon which we are observing right now. The world is changing at a very, very fast pace, and it's a lot of things ambiguous. And with technology changes as well, there was also a very high level of stress when it comes to work security, future ambiguity and confusion. A lot of things are going on, and they are also bombarded by information. So there's a certain degree of information overload. As a result, the stress level is really high because people are generally not ready to cope with that change. They can't anticipate what's coming. So as a result, we find that actually in a lot of interpersonal interactions, you are conditioned into the posture of always trying to double guess what's happening, what is coming to hit at you. For example, in a couple of years ago when we have the COVID situation and suddenly things change, everything stopped working, and for a period of time, people have to adjust, right? So that's kind of the backdrops that we are all talking about here. Now back to your question about some people are basically communicating to reply, and some people are more prepared to understand. So I think we're talking about two different postures here. So people who are basically listening to reply, they are probably in a more defensive mode in that sense. So I think the posture is probably more close as well. And so I've actually encountered some of this situation before and in my work life, right? So when you have, there was an incident where there was a lady coming to me. I was in advertising at the time. I was my writer, and she came to me with really strong tone, demanding to speak to me. Say, Chris, we have to speak now, right? So, and she was standing there with her leg opened and steady, and her fists are now rested on her hips, and she's going, "I'm going to talk to you now." And in that split moment, I could have replied to her, but I know she was probably upset about certain things. So in order for me to have an effective conversation, I need to make sure that she's calmed down. So I would say, yeah, we have to speak, but not now. I need you to calm down a little bit. So maybe the stress that she was feeling at the time was she was uncertain what's going on. Maybe she's required to do some changes that she doesn't agree with. So she's basically picking a time where she want to have a conversation or talking to you, but basically trying to send you question to get the answer that she wants so that she can rebut and defend herself. So we need to understand the motivation behind that. So people who are listening to understand, those are the people who are probably have a little bit more empathy. They are curious to know their audience and to engage in a more meaningful conversation with them. Right? So I think it's a different posture, and you can say one will be with their arm closed around their chest, but the other probably a little bit more engaging. So usually when in our work situation, we tend to meet different people. In a workspace, there is a most complex part of relationship management is really stakeholder management, right? So in a lot of stakeholder relationship management, whether it's with your client, with your staff, with your bosses, with your colleagues, right? So those are the areas where you have a lot of communications. And so this is where we have to be conscious about how to read the sign between people who are really picking a fight or really interested in some collaborations.
So basically, what you're saying is that the non-verbal cues, such as body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice, is
Definitely.
crucial, right, in
Yes.
understanding someone's message. Now, would these nuances be lost in digital communications? Because we do communicate a lot now via teleconferences, on the phone. We don't really meet the person to talk. So how do such non-verbal cues, come across or come through?
It is quite true that you say that it can be lost in digital communication because you don't have the benefit, unless it's a Zoom meeting, you don't have the benefit of looking at a person's face. And especially in a lot of collaborative software now, you basically send messages to Slacks, right? And then you don't really get to see the person's expression. So I think there are some things to get around with. I mean, people put emoji, they put smile, and then capital letter means I'm shouting at you. To in a way try to sort of add in more expression in that. But I think in any case that whatever technique it is, you have to start from the posture and knowing that when you're communicating, you are communicating with another human being, and therefore there has to be a certain level of respect accorded to the other person. You may be angry with the person, but the idea, the thought and the mindset must always be about I'm here to resolve, I'm here to collaborate. And with that, your mental mindset is set in a positive and constructive mode. The way you convey your message will be slightly different. I could actually feel it when I'm communicating with somebody, and the way I've written my message, sometimes it's because it's constructive, it's positive. I could actually end up smiling when I'm writing it. I don't know whether you have this experience, right? So I think it goes back to whatever you do, goes back to the mindset, right? And being professional about it. But we do have to be mindful, especially when in a hurry. Things can come across as abrupt, especially now I think with the new generation, the Gen Z, the millennials, right? The language are very different now, the way they have a lot of abbreviations that we don't understand.
Correct. I was about to ask you. I said, how do you understand, our younger generations who have different expressions now, who's very different from our generation, and the abbreviations, you can't catch it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably on in my family, because I have a daughter. So in my family, probably I'm the only one who writes still text in proper sentences.
Which is important, right?
It's
important, right?
Yeah, I take it as a discipline for myself.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate that they not speak in a different language. So I guess it's a point where you probably have to clarify. And it is the same principle in any communications, right? You listened, you give them the space to basically convey what they want to say, and then you clarify. And there's some technique, right? Clarifying and also feedback and say, is this what you are saying to me? It shows that I'm interested in what you say and not just kind of brushing aside, right?
Yeah. I guess it's the same with our generation as well. Different generations have
Correct.
our own lingo. I think our parents were also puzzled by how we spoke last time. What are some of the common barriers, right, that prevent people from truly understanding what others are saying?
I think the biggest barrier in a lot of communication is preconceived ideas, right? And some perception, the preconceived perceptions. I would call this phenomenon as always already listening, right? So before you speak, I come into this conversation with you, I assume that I'm in some danger with you, and I assume that you're going to say certain thing to hurt me or to jeopardize the collaboration and conversations that we're going to have. So I'm already putting up a defensive mode before you start talking to me. So that as a result, in a way, prep me in a very defensive position. And such, when we have that conversation, when I started asking you questions and when you started talking, I'm already thinking about, what does Pauline mean? Are you trying to, instigate certain things? Are you trying to imply certain things? But all this can be solved by really taking a different posture and say, okay, I'm here to make things work, and I want to make sure that we have a constructive conversation. We want things to move on. We want the problem to be solved. So I'm not trying to, in a way, sometimes you just kind of take away that perception and say, okay, exactly what do you mean by this? Can I clarify that? Because I read it as this. So if I've read it wrongly, I apologize. Let's see how we can move on. There may be things that we disagree. And I think a lot of time we go into a conversation thinking that we have to agree, it has to be a win-win situation. Yes, I think that's great, but sometimes we have to agree to disagree and just respect the other party. And we talk about taking this posture, it all goes back then to the mindset and the value of the person that you're going to be talking to, and your own value as well in terms of how you treat another human being.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to become a better listener? And are there any practical tips that can help one to do that?
I think there's a lot of talk about mindfulness. So being mindful, basically the way I understand it, it's really just being conscious about, your environment, conscious about how the other person look. So reading all the verbal, non-verbal cue, right? What you are saying and what you are not saying, the hesitation that you have and things like this. So key is really be mindful and be observant. I would say other things is really cultivate really in your conversation. Before you go into any conversation, do your homework, especially when it's going to be a difficult one, right? So especially we're talking about the conflict resolution bit. How to move on with situation, what is the deadlock here, understanding what is the overall situation, the barriers that you have to overcome, and then going prepared. So this has got to do with preparations in a mindset, really going there with the intention to solve problems. And then when you are there in the conversation, ask questions. So listen first. Don't be in a hurry to try to complete the other person's sentences, and let them have some breathing space, because you can be very enthusiastic about a particular topic, but the other person has an idea too, and if they feel that they're interrupted, they may be deterred from sharing further. So I think give them some room, and I have learned it the hard way, because I am always very enthusiastic with my ideas, and so I've learned actually when I start giving the other person the space to share their view, validating, clarifying, then you find that the other person are more willing to listen to you as well. So it's really, you take a step back, and then that's kind of, in a way, a more possibility for collaboration.
Well, I guess it's just like, okay, in a work environment, if your boss says something to you, but there seems to be a hidden message. As your boss thinks that, okay, you're adult enough, all right? I say this, but I do not want to say it directly and that clearly to hurt your feelings or whatever. But, you should be able to pick it up. So what do you do in instances, because you come out puzzled, like, what exactly does he mean?
I think what I would do would be different from what a lot of people would do. Also depends on your personalities. I'm more outspoken, so I will basically approach the boss and clarify. So what do you mean by this? Does that mean? Or you ask other probing questions to triangulate where things are. I used to have a boss who tell me, Chris, connect the dot, right? So this is about connecting the dots. So sometimes you gotta get information from multiple sources. It could be the same person, but you ask a question differently to triangulate the issue, and that takes skill, right? And for you to sort of arrive at a probable position as to what your boss means. Of course, the most effective way is really to ask upright. Yeah.
So the gist of it all is to have a better communication. I mean, thank you very much for all the tips that you shared with us. I think the gist of it is really to clarify if you don't understand, or if you feel there is something, that may be wrong, just ask.
Correct.
Right.
And I think it goes back to what I think we're talking about, right? So it's clarifying, but also trying to understand, do your homework in terms of the situation, the background, what's really happening out there. Why would he say something like this? Do the investigations, that research, but don't double guess. always clarify, because otherwise you'll be speaking with some preconception. Oh, are you here to fire me, or are you here to blame me for this particular job? But actually, no, maybe he's just trying to find information. But for other parties who are maybe a little bit more timid and more introvert, they may have to struggle with that, right? So I think it's really in a case where you probably may need to get some coaching, or just kind of, in a way, apply the simple principle of first understanding what the situation is, coming from the perspective of trying to get things done, and be prepared to be brave enough to ask those clarifying questions. Because the onus is on you, for you to sort out what you are exactly dealing with. Yeah.
Thank you, Christina, for joining us in this episode of CA Listen, Sparkling Conversations.